Some stories are told to soothe. They speak of towers reaching the clouds, of radiant girls with hair like sunlight, of princes who scale impossible heights to deliver love and safety. They whisper of magic, of happiness, of endings where justice and virtue prevail. But those stories are lies. The girl in the tower did not wait to be rescued. She was stolen, taken from her family while still an infant, a life traded for a debt most would die to avoid. And the man who climbed the tower in her story? He was no hero. Desire and obsession led him to her, not love. Months of climbing, months of whispered promises, only to abandon her when the shadows of the world grew too sharp to ignore. There was no fairy tale rescue. There was no triumph. She was thrown into the wilderness, carrying life within her, left to face hunger, predators, and cold. Alone, she gave birth to twins. Alone, she learned the bitter arithmetic of survival, scraping life from scraps, clawing hope from despair. The prince, blinded, his eyes torn by thorns, screaming in the forest, his blood staining the underbrush, wandered in anguish. 7 years passed, and when they met again, it was not romance that bound them. It was shared agony, two fractured souls clinging to each other because nothing else remained. This is the true Rapunzel, not the sanitized tale of frying pans and whimsical adventure, but the story collected by the Grimms from trembling grandmothers who understood the cost of desire. A story of debts paid in flesh, of thefts exacting suffering, of survival leaving permanent scars. Tonight you will hear of unwanted pregnancy, mutilated eyes, mothers giving birth alone in the wilderness, and years of relentless, grinding poverty. There is no godmother, no magical reprieve, no clean resolution, only truth. Brutal, harsh, unforgiving, this story begins with something far more mundane and far more cruel than a witch's curse. It begins with a garden, a man too weak to face the consequences of his choices, and theft. There once lived a tradesman and his wife at the border of a vast, dark forest. Neither poor nor rich, ordinary in every conceivable way, but soon to be swept into a chain of horrors that would leave scars on generations yet unborn. The forest remembers everything, and it never forgives. Here begins the story of Rapunzel as it truly was, of stolen innocence, of desire mistaken for devotion, of survival carved in blood and shadow. And beware, some truths are darker than the shadows that hold them. He loved his wife, deeply, unwaveringly, that much was certain. And she carried their first child, a moment that should have been filled with hope and celebration. But the air around their small home carried a weight, heavy and unspoken, as if the shadows themselves were watching, waiting. The pregnancy was unlike any the midwives had seen. She grew pale as moonlight, her strength draining like water through a cracked vessel. Food turned to ash on her tongue, water seemed to choke her. Days blurred into nights. She lay in bed, staring at the wall as though it held the answers to questions no one dared ask, speaking nothing. The midwives shook their heads, murmuring about difficult pregnancies, whispering old truths. Some children are born in shadow, some mothers are claimed by the illness of the womb. We cannot know which fate awaits her. The man was consumed by helplessness, powerless, inadequate. Every passing day made the dread coil tighter in his chest, until one evening she spoke. A voice, fragile, trembling, edged with fevered intensity. "Husband, there is something I must have, something I cannot live without. If I do not taste it, I fear both I and the child will perish." "Anything," he whispered, leaning close, his hand trembling as it brushed hers. "Tell me, I will fetch it, whatever it takes." Her eyes were wild, fever-bright, almost predatory in their intensity. "Rampion," she breathed. "Rapunzel in German, there is a garden next door. Lush green, thriving like no garden I have ever seen. I must have it. I need it. If I do not, we will both die." He went to the window and saw the garden. It was vast, a riot of greenery behind impossibly high walls. Every leaf, every plant, seemed to shimmer with vitality unnatural in its perfection, almost humming with life. The rampion itself gleamed dark and glossy, lying in beds so perfect they seemed to mock him. It was a garden untouched by ordinary hands, a garden of whispers and hidden power. "I can ask the owner to sell some," he offered cautiously, trying to sound rational. Her grip on his arm tightened with astonishing force. Nails dug into his skin. "No, they will never agree. You must take it. A handful, only a handful. It will harm no one. Please." Her voice trembled with an almost supernatural urgency. "I cannot wait. I cannot live without it." He hesitated. Stealing had never crossed his mind. He was a man of ordinary morality, ordinary life. Yet something ancient and primal tugged at him, love, desperation, fear. He nodded, voice barely audible. "Tonight I will get it for you." What neither of them understood, the hidden truth of the garden, was who claimed it. Behind those high walls stood a house long feared, long whispered about. No family, no servants, no visitors. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of the woman who lived there. Some called her enchantress, some sorceress, some witch. Legends of her spanned generations. She had lived for centuries, never aging. Her gaze could turn men to stone or toads. Some said she fed on fear itself, some on children. None dared approach her garden, and fewer dared glance at it. But obsession, hunger, and desperation are stronger than fear. His wife's craving had transformed into command, an unnatural compulsion that seemed to pulse through the walls, through the night, through the very air around him. When the moon rose high, he crept to the wall. Cold, slick with moss, it towered above him, far higher than it had appeared from the window. Fingers scrabbled along rough stone, feet slipped on the damp surface. One misstep would send him crashing into darkness, into the unknown. Finally, he dropped silently into the garden. The night pressed down like a living thing, dense and suffocating. No crickets, no night birds. Only his own ragged breath, hammering heartbeat, and the soft scrape of leaves beneath his hands. He approached the rampion. The leaves seemed almost alive, pulling him closer, yielding easily as if inviting theft. Heart hammering, he stuffed them into his shirt, convinced he could escape undetected. And then she appeared. She came from nowhere. One heartbeat, the garden was empty. The next, she stood between him and the wall, eyes glowing like embers in the silver moonlight. She was not old, not withered, not the crone of Thales. She was ageless, perhaps 30, perhaps 60. Impossible to tell. Her presence twisted the air, bending shadows around her, bending fear into something physical, something almost sentient. The man froze. Somewhere deep, a primal fear warned him. This woman was not a simple gardener. She was danger made flesh. And yet in his pocket the rampion pulsed almost like a heartbeat, alive with dark vitality. There was no turning back. The forest, the garden, the night itself seemed to lean in, waiting, watching. For some debts once incurred are unavoidable, and some choices once made cannot be undone. Her hair hung like a shadow that refused to fall, long and black enough to drink the moonlight. Her beauty was not warm, not human. Every line of her face was carved with precision, like a statue that remembered what it once was and resented it. And her eyes, they were ancient, not old, ancient, the kind of eyes that had watched kingdoms rise, rot, and vanish like dust on a windowsill. Thief! The word didn't need volume. It slithered into the night, soft enough to chill bone. "You enter my garden and dare to take what belongs to me." The man dropped to his knees so hard the gravel bit into his skin. His voice cracked with fear. "Please, my wife, she's carrying our child. She's sick. She said she would die without the herb. I only took a little, just enough to help her." For a moment, nothing moved. Even the wind seemed afraid to breathe. The witch tilted her head, the gesture disturbingly graceful. "Your wife," she murmured as if tasting the word. "How touching." She stepped closer, and the garden seemed to lean away from her. "You steal," she said, "rather than knock at my door like a man who values honesty." "I'll pay you," he whispered, trembling. "Please, anything, name your price." The witch studied him the way predators study prey too frail to bother chasing. Then calmly, "Take it." The man blinked. Surely he'd misheard. "Why, you'll let me?" "Oh, yes," she breathed. "Take as much as your heart desires. Return tomorrow and the night after that. Feed your wife until she glows." Then her voice flattened. "But nothing in this world comes without a debt." The man swallowed. "Tell me the cost." "When the child is born," she said, "you will hand it to me immediately." His breath died in his throat. "No, no, anything but that." "Then let your wife decay," the witch said. "Let her starve from the inside. Let the child shrivel before it even sees daylight." Her words were not threatening. They were matter of fact, like a doctor explaining the consequence of ignoring a wound. Then she added, almost lazily, "And don't pretend this craving came naturally. I nudged her thoughts. I bent her longing. I planted hunger in her mind the way I plant roots in this soil, deep, unshakable." The man stared at her, horrified. You controlled her." "I guided her," she corrected. "The desperation, the obsession, that belonged to her." A pause. "I merely sharpened it. Because I wanted something." Her eyes gleamed with something old and cruel. "Why?" the man whispered. "Why my child?" But she only smiled, a thin curve that revealed nothing but cold certainty. "That is not for you to know. You choose now. Give me what I am owed, or watch your wife's life wither like a forgotten weed." He wanted to stand tall, to deny her, to fight. But courage was something he'd never owned in great supply. He loved his wife too much to lose her. "I agree," he whispered. "The child is yours." The witch's smile deepened, victory without joy. "Then go," she said. "Carry your stolen leaves home, little thief, feed her. Keep her alive until it is time for me to claim what is mine." He left the garden like a man walking out of a nightmare, except the nightmare followed him home. His wife devoured the rampion as though starved for years. Color rushed back to her cheeks so quickly it almost looked unnatural. Her frailty evaporated in days. She slept deeply. She laughed again, and the pregnancy progressed with eerie perfection. But the man could never look at the rampion without feeling the witch's eyes watching through its leaves. 9 months passed like a countdown. The moment the child entered the world, before the midwife could even draw her next breath, the air in the room turned cold. The witch appeared at the window, her arrival silent, as if reality had simply rearranged itself to allow her presence. "The debt," she said. "It is time." The man sobbed, begging, bargaining, offering gold he didn't have, land he didn't own, years of his life he could not control. Anything, everything. His voice cracked under the weight of his terror. But his wife, her face, still pale from childbirth, told a different story. She understood the truth he refused to see. Debts owed to beings like this were older than laws. Older than kingdoms, older than mercy. "Take her," she whispered, her voice hollow, void of hope. "Take the child." The witch lifted the newborn gently, inspecting her as though examining a prize. Strangely, the baby did not scream, did not thrash. She stared back with eyes as dark and unblinking as the witch's own. "Rapunzel," the witch said softly. "A fitting name, for she is the price of what her father stole and the promise I intend to keep." Then she vanished into the night, taking the child with her, leaving behind a house so quiet it felt like a grave. Rapunzel lived, but she would never again belong to the people who created her. And the man would spend the rest of his life wishing he had been strong enough to say no. This is how the story truly begins, not with overt evil, but with the quiet, insidious flaw of ordinary human weakness. A man who should have faced the consequences of his actions, who should have negotiated, asked, pleaded honestly, instead chose theft. And theft, as always, has consequences. The witch was patient. She was old, though not merely in years. She was old in ways humans cannot measure, ancient in thought, in observation, in calculation. She waited. She watched. She manipulated with the precision of a clockmaker, ensuring her desires were fulfilled, coldly, logically, inevitably. And the child became the price. The baby, clutched in her arms as she vanished into the night, was innocent of all of it. The child had done nothing. The child had no debt to pay. And yet she was stolen, claimed, made to bear the weight of her father's weakness. It is important to understand this. Rapunzel was not cursed. She was not enchanted. She was taken simply because she was the only currency available, human flesh to balance a man's misdeed. Rapunzel would never know her parents. She would never taste the ordinary life she might have had, the laughter of a mother, the quiet guidance of a father, the warmth of home untainted by fear and debt. Instead, she belonged to the witch. Property, possession, payment. Her life, from the moment she drew her first breath, was a ledger of debts she never accrued. The witch named her Rapunzel and raised her not with cruelty, exactly, but with a cold, unfeeling precision. She provided food, clothing, shelter. She taught Rapunzel to read, write, and understand the strange, dangerous world outside the forest. She instructed her in music, giving her a voice clear, sweet, and hauntingly pure. Needlework, herb lore, survival skills, Rapunzel learned them all. By every outward measure, she was nurtured, safe, well cared for, but she was never loved. The witch's affection, if it could be called that, was transactional. Rapunzel was a masterpiece to maintain, a treasure to preserve, not a child to cherish. There were no kisses pressed to her hair, no arms wrapping her tight, no whispered assurances that she was wanted beyond her utility. She grew up knowing she was owned, but never questioning why ownership was the only reality she had ever known. The witch told her parents had died in a plague. Rapunzel never doubted it. She had no other reference for family. She had never seen children held close in safety, never heard words of warmth whispered against hair. She only knew the efficiency of the witch, and in that efficiency she believed she was normal. Years passed. The child grew, fragile to girlhood to adolescent form. She was strikingly beautiful. Not merely attractive, not merely pleasant, something about her drew attention like sunlight through fog. And her hair, it grew unnaturally, impossibly fast, golden, thick, shining. By 10, it brushed her waist. By 11, it swept the tops of her knees. The witch noticed everything. Always, nothing escaped her gaze, and with noticing came fear. The witch was no longer human if she had ever been. She had witnessed countless generations of humanity age, die, and vanish. She had no family, no friends, no connection to the mortal world. Centuries of isolation had left her lonely in ways that were almost unbearable, a hunger for connection twisted by time and bitterness. The child had been meant to fill that void, to be a companion who could never leave, a life designed to make eternity bearable. But the witch had erred. She had allowed the child to grow beautiful, to flourish in ways that drew the attention of other humans. Beauty, the witch knew from long experience, was dangerous. Men noticed. Men desired. Men would steal what was not theirs, seduce what could not be held. And Rapunzel must never leave, could never leave. The witch would ensure it. On Rapunzel's 12th birthday, the age when girls were first seen as women, when whispers of marriage began to ripple through villages, the witch acted. "Come," she commanded one morning. "We're taking a journey." They traveled all day. The forest grew denser, the trees older, the shadows deeper. No roads, no villages, no hunters or woodcutters dared venture here. Even the wind seemed to move differently, carrying secrets instead of warmth. And then they arrived. In a clearing that seemed untouched by time, bathed in the faint, eternal glow of twilight, stood a tower. Not merely a building, but a sentinel. Stone walls cold, gray, and unyielding. No door graced its side. A single window high above, unreachable. The air around it was still, unnatural. Shadows clung to the corners, whispering promises and warnings both. Rapunzel did not know yet the full weight of this place. She did not know that this tower, rising from the forest floor like a grave marker to her stolen freedom, would become her prison, her cage, her entire world. The witch turned to her, eyes glinting with something older than the forest itself. "This is your home now." And in that moment, the story of Rapunzel truly began, not with love, not with magic, not with fairy tale promise, but with control, isolation, and a slow, inexorable shaping of a life stolen before it had a chance to breathe. The tower loomed above her like a sentinel carved from stone and shadow, 40 feet tall at least, perhaps more. Its gray walls were impossibly smooth, unbroken by seams, as if the earth itself had grown it overnight. It was circular, maybe 15 feet across, rising relentlessly toward a single unreachable window. "This is your new home," the witch said, her voice calm, unyielding. Rapunzel's eyes widened, heart racing. "Mother, what do you mean? Where is the door?" "There is no door," the witch said. The words fell like stones. "That is the point." She spoke a syllable in a language older than the forest itself, a sound that pressed against Rapunzel's ears and made them ache. Then, impossibly, a window appeared at the base of the tower, just large enough for a girl to squeeze through. The witch guided her inside with hands that were both gentle and commanding. Then she climbed in after her. Inside, the tower was a single circular room, sparse but complete. A bed, a table and chair, a spinning wheel, a chest for clothes, and shelves lined with books. Everything Rapunzel would need to survive. Everything except a way out. "You'll be safe here," the witch said. "Protected, nothing can harm you, no one can take you from me." Rapunzel's lips trembled. "But why? What have I done wrong?" "Nothing," the witch said, her voice briefly softening though the chill remained. "You've done nothing wrong. This is necessary. You are beautiful, child. You cannot know what that means yet, how dangerous it is, how it attracts attention. Here you will be safe. Here you will be mine forever." Rapunzel's gaze searched the walls, smooth and impossible. How will you visit me?" The witch raised her hands, and Rapunzel felt a strange tingle at her scalp. Her hair, already long, surged and poured down in golden waves, coiling across the floor until it was 20 feet long, thick as rope, impossibly heavy. "When I wish to visit," the witch said, "I will stand at the base of the tower and call to you. You will let down your hair, I will climb, and when I leave you will pull it back up." Rapunzel's hands trembled as she touched it. "But won't it hurt?" "No," the witch said. "I have made it strong, strong as rope. It will not break, it will not hurt. Trust me." Her gaze hardened. "Enough questions. This is how it will be. You will adjust. I will visit regularly. Bring you food and supplies. You will want for nothing. You will be safe. This is love, child. This is protection. This is keeping what belongs to me." She moved to the window and murmured another word. A rope appeared, descending to the ground. The witch climbed down, then called up, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The girl obeyed instinctively, gathering the impossibly long strands. They were heavy and warm, flowing like molten sunlight. She let them slip out the window. The witch tested the hair, then climbed with ease. The strands did not snap or tear. Rapunzel felt only the faintest tug, like someone lightly brushing her hair. "Good," the witch said once inside. "Now you understand. This is how it will work. Until my next visit, you have your books, your spinning, your voice. Sing if you like. There is no one to hear you save for the birds." she descended again, leaving Rapunzel alone. Rapunzel pulled her hair back up and listened as the sound of the witch's departure faded into the forest. That first day was the worst. Rapunzel ran to the window, peering down at the ground far below. Even with her hair, she could not descend safely. No one could hold the other end. Her heart thudded. She searched the walls for cracks or seams, anything that might offer escape. There was nothing. Perfect, unyielding stone. Hours passed. She screamed. She cried. She threw herself onto the bed until her muscles ached and her sobs faded. She called for the witch, demanded explanations, pleaded for freedom, but only silence answered. Exhaustion finally took her. She curled into herself, golden hair coiled around her like a river, and she slept. When she awoke, the room was dark. Candlelight flickered against the circular walls. Outside, the forest loomed, vast and indifferent. Rapunzel sat by the window, tracing the shapes of distant trees, trying to understand what had happened to her life. The tower was beautiful in a cold way, a safe place wrapped in shadow. But it was a prison, too. In the quiet, Rapunzel felt it. The slow weight of isolation, the creeping awareness that her freedom had been stolen before she could even comprehend it. The tower would teach her many things: patience, self-sufficiency, the music of her own voice. But it would also teach her fear, longing, and the truth that safety can be another word for captivity. And so, as the candle flickered and shadows stretched across the walls, Rapunzel began to understand the tower's full truth. She was utterly alone. This became the rhythm of Rapunzel's life, the relentless cadence of 6 years. The witch arrived every 3 days. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Obediently, she released the heavy golden strands, and the witch climbed up, bearing food and supplies. The visits were brief, marked not by conversation, but by inspection. Every gesture measured, every word precise. The witch spoke of the outside world in fragments, almost as though reminding Rapunzel that life existed beyond the tower, though the glimpses were small, curated, controlled. Occasionally she stayed to eat, silent company in the girl's isolated prison, but there was no warmth, no laughter, no hint of connection. She was treated as one might treat livestock, nourished, monitored, observed. And then, as predictably as the sun's rising, she would vanish again, leaving Rapunzel alone. The years passed, from 12 to 18, the most formative years of any young woman, and Rapunzel grew in absolute isolation. What does such confinement do to a human mind? She had her books, each one read until every word was memorized, each story a fleeting companion. She spun thread endlessly until her fingers were calloused and her arms ached. She embroidered obsessively, covering the room with tapestries of her own making. But it was her voice that endured as her sanctuary. She sang constantly, songs of old taught by the witch when she was small. Hymns, prayers, and melodies she invented herself, songs that gave shape to the confusion, the grief, and the unnameable loneliness pressing on her soul. Her voice was extraordinary, clear, pure, resonant. It traveled through the forest, slipping past branches and leaves, reaching creatures she could never see. Birds gathered on the window ledge. Foxes paused in the shadows. Even the ancient trees seemed to lean closer, bending slightly toward the sound. Unbeknownst to her, the voice had a reach far beyond the tower. It slipped into hidden places, whispered through the undergrowth, and finally reached someone who would listen. By her 18th birthday, Rapunzel had adapted to her prison as far as any human might. Tears no longer fell, begging was a memory. She had accepted her existence, tower, forest, witch. Nothing else existed. She knew nothing of villages, cities, or human lives beyond. She had never seen love or marriage, children or friendship. She existed suspended in time, neither child nor woman, neither prisoner nor free, simply a being marking time with no notion of what she might one day desire. Every day she stood at her window and sang. Not in hope, not in defiance, but in survival. Her songs were threads connecting her to the world she would never touch. Meanwhile, far from the tower, a young prince wandered deeper into the forest than he had ever dared. He was not questing, not seeking adventure or glory. He carried no purpose but the simple human need for breath, for a temporary escape from duty. At 19, the prince faced the looming expectations of court, marriage, heirs, political obligations. Here in the forest, he was free. That day he followed a deer, lost it, chased another, and gradually became disoriented. He was not in peril, supplies were enough, and he understood the lay of the land in broad strokes, but he would likely sleep in the forest. Searching for a suitable clearing, he heard it, a voice. It was distant, yet impossibly clear. The most beautiful voice he had ever heard, weaving through the ancient trees. He halted, heart caught in his chest, listening. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, carried on the wind, ethereal and unearthly. He strained to find its source. North, northeast, somewhere ahead, hidden in the shadows. Guided by instinct, he urged his horse forward. The voice swelled, pure and haunting, and he realized with a shiver that the song was one he half recognized, a folk tune from his childhood, but rendered into something transcendent, almost supernatural. The forest grew older here, more ancient. Trees thick and gnarled, untouched by human hand, roots coiling like serpents along the ground. No path led forward, no sign of man or road. Just shadow, moss, and the singing voice that seemed to call not just to his ears, but to something deeper, primal. For 20 minutes he pressed on, following the voice through the dense, silent forest. And then the trees opened. There it was. The tower, rising impossibly tall, alone in a clearing untouched by humans for centuries. A single window at its peak. And beneath it the source of the voice. A young woman, radiant, golden hair cascading over the forest floor, singing into the wind, unaware that her song had drawn him there. For a moment the prince was frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. The forest held its breath, birds stilled on branches. Even the wind seemed to pause, bending around the tower in reverent silence. And thus, the first collision of two lives, shaped by isolation, by expectation, by the weight of unseen debts, was set into motion. The tower dominated the clearing like a forgotten monument, an ancient spine of gray stone stabbing into the forest sky. It rose so high it seemed to swallow the sun, its surface unnaturally smooth, carved from a single slab of rock that bore no seams, no cracks, and no door. Only one window broke the stone, a lonely opening near the top where the forest wind whispered through. And from that window the song flowed. The prince approached slowly, almost reverently, as if afraid to disturb a sacred thing. He tethered his horse to an old, twisted oak and moved closer, stepping through tangled grass and roots older than kingdoms. He walked around the structure once, then again, slower, trying to understand it. No entrance. No marks of construction. No path leading to it. Just stone rising straight from the earth like a grave marker for something ancient. The voice above continued to weave through the air, soft, aching, impossibly beautiful, completely unaware of him. Finally, he cupped his hands and called, "Hello, can you hear me?" The singing stopped. Silence fell so suddenly the forest itself seemed to freeze. Then, after a heartbeat that seemed to stretch endlessly, a pale face appeared at the window. A girl, no, something almost otherworldly in her stillness. Her hair caught the afternoon light like molten gold, long strands drifting in the breeze. "Who are you?" she called, her voice even in speech smooth as water over glass. "A traveler," he replied. "Lost, I heard your song, I followed it here, I mean no harm, I'm only trying to find the main road." Rapunzel studied him from above, her expression unreadable. In her conscious memory, she had seen only one human being, the witch. This young man, fine clothes dusted with leaves, hair tousled from riding, bright eyes staring up. He was like a myth brought to life. "The road lies east," she said after a moment. "Walk straight through the forest. By midday you'll find it again." "Thank you," he said. He should go. He knew he should. But curiosity tethered him to this place. "Forgive me, but why are you up there? How do you live in such a tower?" Rapunzel blinked. "This is my home. But there is no way in, no door, no stairs. How do you come and go?" "I don't. I live here with my mother." The prince felt a cold ripple run down his spine. "Your mother placed you in a tower with no door." His voice nearly broke on the absurdity. "Why would she ever do such a thing?" Rapunzel hesitated. The question echoed inside her in a way that made something shift, something long dormant. She had never truly questioned it, not deeply. "She says it is to keep me safe, safe from people, safe from the world." "That isn't safety," the prince murmured. "That is captivity." "Is it?" Rapunzel asked quietly. She genuinely did not know. "I have food, books, shelter. I am not harmed." "Is that not what life requires?" The prince opened his mouth, but no words came. "How do you explain freedom to someone who has never breathed it? How do you describe the sky to someone who has only known walls?" "I should go," he said at last. "Night will fall soon." He mounted his horse. Before leaving the clearing, he looked up once more. Rapunzel remained at the window, watching him with an emotion he couldn't place: curiosity, longing, bewilderment, hunger for something she did not yet understand. He lifted his hand. She did the same. And then he rode away, back through the whispering trees. But her voice stayed with him, threaded into his thoughts, echoing in the quiet spaces of his mind. A caged girl who believed her cage was home. A song so beautiful it sounded like grief. He tried to sleep that night beneath the stars, but her question haunted him. "Is that not enough?" No, it wasn't enough. Food is not life. Shelter is not freedom. Survival is not living. And in the stillness of the night, he understood that he would return. He arrived again the next day. He told himself he was simply checking on her well-being, ensuring that the mother who imprisoned her had not harmed her further. But another truth pressed beneath that excuse. He wanted to hear her sing again. When he reached the clearing, she was already singing. The same melody as before, but now he listened with a knowing heart. He stood beneath the window, letting her voice spill over him like sunlight. When the final note dissolved, he called up softly, "That was astonishing." Her face appeared again, startled. "You came back. I needed to hear you sing again," he admitted. "I hope that isn't intrusive. No one has ever praised my singing." Rapunzel's voice held an innocence that hurt to hear. "My mother says it is serviceable." The prince laughed softly. "Serviceable. It is nothing less than a gift, a rare one." And so they talked, first cautiously, then openly. He told her of the world beyond her tower, cities bursting with color, markets noisy with life, festivals that made entire streets glow. She listened as though he were reciting spells. "What is a festival? What is a marketplace? How many people live in a city?" Every answer felt like he was describing color to someone who had lived in grayscale all her life. He left at dusk but promised he'd return. And he did. Day after day, each visit lingered longer. The forest soon memorized the sound of his horse. The tower began to feel less silent, the days less empty. She told him of her solitude, her endless routines, her aching loneliness. He told her of pressures and crowns and invisible chains, his own kind of prison. Two souls in different cages, recognizing one another through the bars. They should have been strangers, yet they became something else entirely, two echoes meeting in the hollow spaces of their lives. A week passed. Rapunzel turned to the prince with sudden curiosity, her eyes sharp in the late afternoon light. "What does my mother look like?" she asked. Your mother, he frowned. I haven't met your mother. She comes every 3 days, she said, her voice almost a whisper, trembling in memory. She calls from below. I let down my hair and she climbs up. The prince froze. If you saw her, you would understand. What kind of person locks their own daughter in a tower? He frowned, confused. Locks you in a tower, let down your hair. What do you mean? Rapunzel explained carefully, as though recounting a dream she half suspected wasn't real. The enchanted hair, the climbing, the witch's silent inspections, the careful routines. You mean your hair? It's 20 feet long? He asked, disbelief flickering across his face. More than that now, Rapunzel said. It keeps growing. She leaned out the window and let the golden cascade spill down the tower wall, pooling at his feet like liquid sunlight. It shimmered on the forest floor, thick and heavy, soft as silk yet strong as iron rope. The prince reached out, running his fingers through it. It was real, alive almost, and he understood suddenly how he might reach her. Rapunzel, he said slowly, if your mother climbs it to reach you, could I? The forest seemed to hold its breath. There was a long silence from above. Then a quiet, hesitant voice, you want to come up? I want to talk to you, he said, his words almost breaking. Not shouting back and forth, I want to see you face to face. Another pause, then, all right. Watch how she does it next time, then you can try. 2 days later, the prince hid among the trees. His heart thumped violently, ears straining for the slightest sound. He watched the witch arrive. She was a shadow moving through the trees, silent but for the faint rustle of her robes. She called, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. Golden sunlight caught the strands as they poured down the tower wall. The witch gripped them with practiced ease, climbing with a fluid, predatory grace that made his chest tighten. The prince waited until she vanished into the forest, her dark figure swallowed by the shadows, then stepped forward. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, he called, mimicking the cadence and tone of her captor. The hair obeyed. It slipped through his hands, impossibly strong, like a rope woven of sunlight itself. He tested it, then began to climb. Each movement burned his arms. Smooth stone offered no grip for his feet. Every muscle screamed as he pulled himself upward inch by inch until finally he reached the window. And there she was, Rapunzel, alive, real. Standing before him, her hair spread across the floor like a living river of gold. But it was her eyes that struck him most. Large, dark, luminous, filled with a raw innocence that hurt to witness. She had known only this tower, only the cold efficiency of the witch. No touch had comforted her, no human voice had offered genuine warmth. They studied one another, frozen for a long, heavy moment. Then almost simultaneously they laughed. The tension, the strangeness, the impossibility of it all burst in a fragile, shared relief. I'm Rapunzel, she said, though he already knew. He hesitated. Should he tell her who he was? That he was a prince, heir to a throne? Something in him whispered that revealing it would change her, make her wary. My name is Friedrich, he said instead. Friedrich, she repeated slowly, testing the word on her tongue. That's a strong name. And Rapunzel, he said, softer now, is a beautiful one. Though strange to be named after a vegetable, he added with a small smile. She laughed. I never thought about it. It's just my name. They spoke for hours that first day. He told her stories of the outside world, omitting the burdens of royalty but sharing the vibrancy and life beyond her high window. She told him of the endless repetition of her days, the isolation, the rituals that defined her. By the time the sun was dipping behind the trees, he knew he had to leave. Will you come back? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, a tremor of hope threading through it. Do you want me to? He asked. Yes, she said simply. Very much. I'll return tomorrow, he promised, and he did, and the day after that. A pattern formed, afternoon visits, golden hair cascading from the window, hours spent talking of the impossible, the seasons, the human world, the mysteries of sunlight and shadow. They spoke, and in those conversations, something fragile and secret began to grow. Connection, understanding, affection. Rapunzel learned laughter. Friedrich learned wonder. They were falling in love without knowing the word for it. Rapunzel had never experienced warmth, affection, love. The witch's care had been possessive, dutiful, cold, but this was different. Here she was seen. Here she was heard. The prince, in turn, had never known companionship without expectation, without politics, without titles weighing every gesture. This girl wanted nothing but his presence. She knew nothing of crowns, yet gave him a freedom he had never known. Weeks passed, then a month. The prince's prolonged absences began to draw attention. Hunting trips became excuses, the court murmured. His father noticed but tolerated it, assuming a young man's whims. And then the inevitable happened. One evening, as Friedrich descended Rapunzel's hair, he heard the witch's presence approaching through the undergrowth. "Hide!" Rapunzel hissed. He dropped to the forest floor, diving into the underbrush just as she stepped into the clearing. Her gaze swept the trees with predatory precision. She called up in that same flat, possessive tone, "Rapunzel! Rapunzel, let down your hair!" The golden rope descended. She climbed swiftly, mechanically, with no warmth, no emotion, just property being retrieved. Friedrich watched from the shadows, listening. The witch's voice cut through the forest air like steel. "Why have you changed?" she demanded. Rapunzel's voice, carefully neutral, replied, "Nothing has changed, mother. Everything is as always." And somewhere deep in the forest, Friedrich shivered, realizing just how cold, how relentless the witch truly was. A long, oppressive silence followed the witch's final words, as if the forest itself held its breath. "See that it stays that way. You belong here in this tower, safe from the world. Never forget that." The prince felt a cold fury rising in his chest, coiling like a serpent. This wasn't protection. It was imprisonment, a cage wrapped in the guise of care. Anger burned through him, sharp and unforgiving, but he held it, waited, breathing quietly until the witch's shadow disappeared into the forest. Then, almost instinctively, he called up again. He climbed, each movement deliberate, muscles straining, heart pounding. When he entered the tower, Rapunzel was pale, trembling slightly. "She suspects something," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the window. "She's never asked so many questions before." "We have to be more careful," the prince agreed, tension tightening his jaw. But being careful grew harder with each passing day. Their meetings, which had begun as companionship, were transforming. What was once curiosity became longing, fleeting connection became dependency. Every thought the prince had while away from her was of Rapunzel. The tilt of her head as she pondered a question, the way her laugh caught and danced in the air, the quiet wisdom in her eyes that belied her years. Rapunzel, too, was feeling something she could not name. A hunger, a need, stronger than food or water. She would linger at the window for hours after he left, tracing the path he had vanished along, counting the time until he would return, imagining the weight of his presence in the empty room. 2 months after their first meeting, the late afternoon sun slanted across the tower window. They sat close together, the prince's hand brushing against hers. Rapunzel flinched at first, startled by the warmth, by the contact. "Rapunzel," he said gently, "I have to tell you something." Her wide eyes searched his face. "What is it?" "I'm not just a traveler," he said, hesitant. "My father is the king of the realm to the east. I'm a prince. And when I return home, I'm expected to marry, to produce heirs, to fulfill duties I never asked for." She recoiled, pulling her hand away, hurt flashing across her features. "So this is temporary," she whispered. These visits, whatever this is between us, you'll leave, marry someone else, and forget me." "No," he said urgently, leaning closer. "That's not what I mean. What I mean is," he paused, swallowing, "I want to marry you. Not some court lady I've never met. I want to bring you back with me, show you the world, make you my wife." Rapunzel stared, eyes wide, heart hammering in her chest. "Your wife," she repeated. The word tasted foreign, strange, yet heavy with possibility. "Yes," he said. "If you'll have me, I know it's sudden, I know you barely know me, but he struggled for words, chest tightening. "I love you. I think I've loved you since the first time I heard you sing." Rapunzel whispered the word, unsure. "Love!" She had read it in books, abstract and distant, but never felt it before. What did it truly mean? "It's what I feel when I'm with you," the prince said softly. "The world makes sense. I'm more myself than I've ever been. I would do anything, anything to keep you safe, to keep you happy." Rapunzel's chest tightened. "I feel that too. When you're here, the tower doesn't feel like a prison. When you leave, it's as if the light goes out." "Is that love?" he asked. "I think it might be," she said, voice trembling. He leaned closer, pressing his lips gently to hers, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she did not. She leaned into him, into the warmth, into this new, overwhelming feeling that made her chest ache and her heart race. Her first kiss, and it would not be the last. The weeks that followed were a fevered dream. He came every day. Conversation alone was no longer enough. They explored each other in ways young lovers always do, tentative at first, then bold, filled with desperate curiosity. Rapunzel, who had lived her entire life in the cold, solitary confines of the tower, was suddenly being touched, held, kissed, desired. Overwhelming, terrifying, wonderful, everything she had never known she had been missing. The prince no longer returned to the palace at night. He camped in the forest, hidden in the shadows. When messengers came from his father demanding his return, he ignored them. Nothing mattered except Rapunzel. Together they began to plan. Supplies would be smuggled, rope climbing tools, provisions for the journey. Rapunzel would descend safely. They would flee the tower, ride to his palace, and marry before anyone could object. It was a perfect plan, beautiful, impossible. And yet, it was the first moment either of them had felt truly free. It lasted exactly 3 months. Every day, Rapunzel and the prince had stolen moments together, learning, laughing, imagining a life beyond the gray tower walls. And then Rapunzel made a mistake. The witch arrived on a bright afternoon in late summer, climbing the hair as always, her basket of provisions swinging at her side. The tower had never seemed so quiet, so still, as though the forest itself sensed the approaching storm. Rapunzel hummed a light tune as she worked at her spinning wheel, her movements fluid and easy, unburdened, almost carefree. The witch's eyes narrowed immediately. Something was different. The girl was different. There was a lightness, a freedom that had no place in her ordered, imprisoned world. The witch said nothing at first, merely observing, calculating, and then it happened. Rapunzel, speaking without thought, with the innocence of youth, said, "Mother, you're so much heavier than Friedrich. It hurts my head when you climb." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. The name, the comparison, the implications sank into the room like a blade. The room went impossibly quiet. Even the shadows seemed to pause. The witch turned slowly, her eyes cold and sharp, locking onto Rapunzel. "What did you say?" Her voice was calm, almost lethally so, like a blade hidden in velvet. Rapunzel clutched her mouth, horror washing over her. I didn't mean—" "Who is Friedrich?" the witch asked, stepping closer. Her presence was suffocating. Every corner of the tower seemed to shrink. "No one," Rapunzel stammered. I misspoke, just a name I heard." The witch's gaze darkened. "How long?" she asked, the word low, slow, full of menace. Rapunzel's voice trembled. 3 months. He comes every day. He's going to take me away. We have a plan. Shock, betrayal, and rage flickered across the witch's face, replaced swiftly by something colder, more terrifying than mere anger. "You let someone into my tower," she said, voice low, precise, venomous. "You let a man touch you, contaminate you, after everything I did to keep you safe, after everything I sacrificed." "You didn't sacrifice anything," Rapunzel said, defiance sparking despite her fear. "You stole me, locked me in a tower. I've learned about the world, about freedom, about living, and I want that. I want to leave." The witch laughed. It was a sound that scraped along the walls and echoed in the forest beyond. "You think you can leave? You think I would let you walk away after 18 years? You ungrateful, stupid girl, you belong to me. You've always belonged to me." "I'm not yours." Rapunzel's voice shook, but her eyes blazed. "I'm my own person. And I'm leaving with Friedrich. Tomorrow we have a plan." The witch's eyes gleamed, black and predatory. "Well then, I suppose I should let you go. After all, you've made your choice." From her basket, she produced a pair of large, gleaming shears. Rapunzel's eyes widened in terror. "If you want to leave so badly," the witch said, advancing, "then I'll help you, but you're not taking my gift with you." She seized Rapunzel's hair. The girl screamed, twisting and pulling, but the witch's strength was inhuman. She brought the shears close and began to cut. The hair fell in golden coils onto the floor, 20 feet of it vanishing in minutes. Rapunzel felt a strange, hollow weight lift from her scalp as her magical hair disappeared. "There," the witch said, stepping back. "Now you're no one special, just an ordinary girl with ordinary hair. Let's see if your prince still wants you." The witch wrapped the hair around her arm, her smile sharp and cruel. Then she spoke a word. The tower's top window expanded, widening unnaturally, a jagged, irregular opening, large enough for a person to pass through. "Go," the witch said, voice dripping contempt. "Climb out, make your way through the wilderness. See how long you survive with no skills, no knowledge, no one to help you. You can't. I can. I'm done with you. You've ruined everything. Contaminated yourself with that man. You're worthless to me now." She shoved Rapunzel toward the opening. Rapunzel froze, staring at the 40-foot drop below. "I'll die," she whispered. "Then die," the witch said coldly. Her eyes were like ice. "It's all the same to me." But even in her fury, the witch could not bring herself to kill the girl outright. That would be admitting defeat. Instead, she muttered another word, darker and older, one that made the stones of the tower shiver. Thick, thorned vines erupted from the wall below the window, twisting and writhing like serpents. They coiled and bent toward the earth, forming a grotesque ladder. Each movement was deliberate, slow, mocking. The witch's final gift, or her trap, was complete. Rapunzel stared at the writhing green ladder, the distance, the hardness of the ground below, the impossibility of survival without help. She realized with a cold, sinking horror that her escape would be nothing like the plan she and Friedrich had devised. The tower that had been her prison for 18 years was now a weapon against her, a crucible of fear, testing her courage, her trust, her resolve. Above her, the witch's laugh faded into the forest, leaving Rapunzel alone. Alone, with only the impossible drop, the deadly vines, and the knowledge that freedom had a price far higher than she had ever imagined. The witch had prepared everything. The thick, thorned vines twisted beneath the tower like a cruel trap, waiting for the prince. Rapunzel, terrified and trembling, had climbed down and collapsed at the base of the tower. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, unfamiliar and frightening. She had wanted freedom. Now she had it, and it was more terrifying than any prison. The next morning the prince arrived, his saddlebags filled with ropes, harnesses, food, and water. Today was the day. Today he would take Rapunzel away from the tower forever. He rode into the clearing and called up, as always, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Golden hair cascaded down like sunlight, just as strong, just as inviting. The prince began to climb, practiced and confident, until he reached the window and froze. The witch was there, calm, cold, her hands wrapped around the severed golden hair like it was a leash. She had lured him into her trap. "Hello, prince," she said, venom in every syllable. "Looking for someone?" He stumbled backward. "Where's Rapunzel? What have you done?" "Gone," she replied, her tone casual. "Banished, contaminated, ruined. And it's all your fault. You hurt her," he shouted. "I raised her, fed her, protected her, and she repaid me by spreading her legs for the first man who climbed her tower," the witch spat. "So yes, I hurt her, I cut her hair. I threw her out, she's probably dead somewhere in the wilderness by now." "You monster," the prince gasped. "She was never my daughter," the witch said sharply. "She was property, payment for a debt. You came with your pretty words and empty promises, and you ruined everything." "I love her," the prince said, defiant. "I came to give her a life, real life." "Love," the witch spat. "You don't even know her. You know nothing about who she is, where she came from, why she was in this tower. You saw beauty and wanted it, just like everyone else." Then she revealed the truth. Rapunzel's father had been a thief. To save his wife, he had traded Rapunzel, an infant, to the witch. She was not a princess, not royalty, not special, just currency. The prince shook his head. "I don't care. I love who she is, not where she came from. I'll find her. I'll save her." The witch smiled, cruel and deliberate. "Well then, off you go." She yanked the severed hair hard, pulling it through the window. The prince lost his balance, falling backward. For a heartbeat, he was weightless. Then the ground rushed up, and with it the witch's trap. Thorns, thick, vicious, and arranged with deadly precision. They pierced through his clothes, scraped his skin, tore at his arms and legs. Then 2 thorns struck his eyes. Sharp, perfect, and merciless. Pain exploded in his head. Screams tore from him, animal and primal. He rolled, thrashed, tried to escape, but every movement drove him deeper into agony. The thorns tore at him mercilessly, and the 2 that had struck his eyes destroyed them completely. When he finally stilled, the world had gone black, darkness, pain, blood. He could sense light and shadow faintly, but nothing more. The witch's voice drifted from the tower above, cold and victorious. "That's the price for taking what isn't yours. You wanted to see her. Now you never will." Hours passed. The prince crawled through the forest, guided by sound and instinct, his body broken, his spirit near collapse. Every thought of Rapunzel tore at him. Was she alive? Was she safe? Could he ever find her in this endless wilderness? The truth was crushing. He couldn't. He was helpless, useless. The life he had known as Prince Hunter, man of action, was gone. Only pain and darkness remained. He should return to the palace, seek help, accept pity, but he couldn't face it. Not yet, not while Rapunzel's fate was still unknown. He didn't go home. Friedrich stood swaying, dizzy from blood loss and pain. He picked a direction at random and walked, accepting that he would die in the wilderness. Perhaps it was what he deserved, for failing Rapunzel, for not protecting her, for not reaching her sooner. He walked until his legs gave out. Then he crawled. Then he lay still, waiting for death. But death didn't come. He was strong, young, healthy. His wounds, terrible as they were, weren't immediately fatal. His body healed what it could. Pain faded from unbearable to a constant companion. Days passed, weeks, months. Friedrich wandered blind, alone, surviving on whatever he could forage. Berries identified by taste and touch, streams for water, small animals caught through sheer luck. He had no destination, no goal, just a relentless, aimless march. Years passed. His clothes became rags. His hair and beard tangled and matted. Hands calloused from navigating the world by touch. He became a ghost, less than a ghost, a wandering corpse unaware of death. Somewhere else, Rapunzel was learning the same brutal lessons. She had walked for 3 days before collapsing, weak, dehydrated, starving. Her entire life had been sheltered. She had no survival skills. By the second day, she was drinking from muddy puddles. By the third, she could barely move. She lay beneath a tree, preparing to die. But humans are resilient. Her body refused to surrender. An old woman gathering herbs found her. She fed Rapunzel, nursed her back to health, and taught her survival. Identifying edible plants, starting fires, trapping small animals. Weeks later, Rapunzel left, walking into a village, begging for work. She worked washing dishes at an inn, earning almost nothing. And then something terrified her. She was pregnant. Too traumatized to notice before, she now understood. A month had passed since leaving the tower. She was carrying Friedrich's child. Months later, a midwife confirmed twins. Rapunzel worked tirelessly, saved every penny, and finally rented a tiny room, giving birth alone. One daughter, then another. Tiny, perfect, wailing, and alive. Rapunzel held them, weeping from the intensity of survival and love, overwhelmed by her new reality. Raising twins in poverty was brutal. She worked multiple jobs, leaving the girls with neighbors or letting them play in the streets. Love didn't pay rent. Love didn't fill stomachs, but it kept them alive. 7 years passed. Rapunzel was barely recognizable. Short hair, lined face, worn hands. She moved from village to village, carrying water, hauling work, raising her daughters. And then one day she heard a voice, rough, off-key, but familiar, singing a song from her tower childhood. She turned. A blind beggar sat against a wall, filthy, emaciated, eyes ruined, yet something about him was familiar. "Friedrich," she whispered. The man froze. "That's not possible. Rapunzel is gone." "I'm here," she said, moving closer. The twins clung to her skirts. "I've been wondering, hoping, but I couldn't see, couldn't ask for help. I lost everything," he said hoarsely. "I'm here," Rapunzel repeated, kneeling and taking his hands, scarred, calloused like hers. "The point?" he asked bitterly. "The point," she said, "is we survived." And then she cried. All 7 years of fear, pain, and loneliness poured out. Her tears fell on his ruined eyes. A miracle, or perhaps fate, occurred. Friedrich felt warmth tingling, a flicker of light in his damaged sockets. Shapes formed, colors appeared. Slowly he could see her, really see her, for the first time in 7 years. "I can see you," he whispered. Rapunzel stared, unbelieving. "Yes," he said, "it's you, really you." They held each other in that filthy alley, the twins watching silently. After a long pause, Friedrich looked at the girls. "Who are these children?" "Your daughters," Rapunzel said. "Ilda and Helena, 7 years old, pregnant when the witch cast me out." "I'm your father?" he asked awkwardly in a voice foreign to him. "Yes," Rapunzel said. Friedrich laughed, a sound rusty, broken, but alive. "I was once a prince. I have nothing to offer except myself." "That's enough," Rapunzel said firmly. "That's all I ever wanted." Together, all four began the long journey back to Friedrich's kingdom. 2 weeks on foot without horses. The guards didn't recognize him at first, but eventually someone who knew the prince closely saw the truth. The story of survival, love, and reunion was beginning to spread. The king was summoned. The reunion was tense. He was overjoyed to have his son returned from the dead, but horrified by Friedrich's condition. The scars, the years of suffering, and most of all, the presence of a common woman and two illegitimate daughters. His explanation was simple: "I love them." The king wanted to send Rapunzel away, arrange a proper marriage for Friedrich, legitimize the twins, raise them separately. This was not how royalty conducted themselves, but Friedrich had changed. 7 years of blindness and suffering had burned away his desire to please anyone but himself. "I will marry Rapunzel," he told his father. She is the mother of my children and the woman I love. If you cannot accept that, I will abdicate and we will leave." The king had already lost his son once. He wasn't willing to lose him again. He agreed, grudgingly, disapprovingly, but he agreed. The wedding was small, far from the grand affairs princes usually had, but it was real. Rapunzel wore a simple dress, clean and decent. Friedrich wore formal attire, though years in rags made it hard to adjust. The twins were flower girls. It should have been a happy ending, but happy endings are myths. Reality is far more complicated. Friedrich resumed royal duties. His father was aging, and though Friedrich had been away, he was still a prince, capable and respected. The vision in his right eye had returned, though the left remained blind. Enough to see, but not to be whole. Rapunzel became a queen. She had servants, wealth, comfort, but she did not know how to be royalty. Court ladies whispered, sneered, called her the commoner princess. The tower had left its mark. She couldn't sleep in rooms without windows. Nightmares plagued her. Friedrich had his own demons. Blindness had taught him to navigate by sound and touch. Now, with sight restored, his brain betrayed him. He stumbled, reached for things that weren't there, startled at movement he couldn't predict. Anger, frustration, guilt. He carried it all. The twins adjusted better, young enough to accept a new normal. They asked questions about their father's scars, their mother's nightmares, the poverty they'd survived. Rapunzel and Friedrich had no good answers. The witch was never found. Soldiers searched, but the tower had vanished. Perhaps she died of loneliness. Perhaps she survived for centuries, bitter and alone. Her fate remained a cruel unknown. Rapunzel wanted closure, wanted revenge, wanted to scream at the witch for stealing her childhood, for destroying Friedrich, for everything. But the witch was gone. Only anger and trauma remained. Years passed. The king died. Friedrich became king. Rapunzel became queen. They had more children, 2 sons. Life continued. From the outside, it looked like a success story. The imprisoned girl became queen, the blind prince regained sight, love triumphed. But privately, Rapunzel still woke screaming. Friedrich still experienced phantom blindness. Old traumas shaped arguments, fears, insecurities. Love didn't erase the past, it only gave a reason to endure it. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Friedrich asked, "Are you happy?" Rapunzel thought long before answering. "I don't know if happy is the right word. I'm alive. I have you. Our children, freedom, safety, a life I chose. That's more than I ever dreamed." "Is that happiness?" Friedrich asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought getting you back, building a life together would fix everything, but we're still broken, aren't we?" "Broken but functioning," she said. "Maybe that's the best we can hope for." They held hands, watching the sunset. Survivors of impossible things, doing their best with the aftermath. Not a fairy tale ending, but real. Rapunzel was 45 when her hair began growing again. Shoulder length, then to her back. One morning it surged past the floor, unstoppable. It terrified her. Long hair had meant the tower, imprisonment, the witch's control. She cut it obsessively. Every day, sometimes multiple times. But it kept returning faster than before. Friedrich found her one evening, scissors in hand, sobbing. "It won't stop," she said. "She's still controlling me." "She's dead," Friedrich said, uncertain. "She can't hurt you anymore." "Then why?" Rapunzel demanded. No one knew. Physicians, scholars, magicians, none could explain it. The hair was enchanted, permanent. Eventually, she stopped fighting, let it grow. It reached the floor, then had to be carried. She looked like the girl in the tower again, except she wasn't a girl. She was a middle-aged queen, lines etched by labor, gray streaks in gold hair, a ghost wearing a costume of her past. She withdrew from public life. Days were spent in her chambers. The long hair coiled around her like a golden prison. Friedrich tried to comfort her, but he had his own ghosts. Phantom pain in his blind eye, memories of being useless, helpless. Their children grew, left, married, and had children. The kingdom prospered. Life moved on, but Rapunzel and Friedrich remained trapped in memory, in trauma, in what the tower had done to them. Physically free, powerful, safe, but psychologically, emotionally, never fully released. One night late in life, Rapunzel asked, "If you could go back knowing what you know now, would you still climb my tower? Would you still try to save me?" Friedrich thought of all the pain, the blindness, the years of struggle. "Yes," he said finally. "Even knowing all of it, I would still climb, because leaving you there, I couldn't do that. Even though it destroyed you, even though it destroyed us both. Some things are worth being destroyed for," she whispered, and so they remained, broken, haunted, alive, and together. Rapunzel started to cry. "I don't know if I can believe that," she said. "I don't know if anything is worth what we went through." "Then believe this," Friedrich said, taking her hand. "We survived, both of us. Against all odds, against all logic, we survived. And we did it together. That has to mean something." "Does it?" Rapunzel asked. "Or are we just two broken people clinging to each other because we don't know how to do anything else?" Friedrich didn't answer. He didn't know. After all these years, he still didn't. Let's talk about what this story really means. It's not about romantic love conquering all. It's not about a prince rescuing a princess. It's not about good defeating evil. It's about the price we pay for other people's desires. Rapunzel paid for her father's theft. The prince paid for his desire. The witch paid for her need to possess. Everyone wanted something. Everyone took what they wanted. Everyone suffered the consequences. Her father stole to satisfy his wife's craving. The price? His daughter. The witch imprisoned a child to satisfy her desire for companionship. The price? Loneliness. The prince climbed the tower, took what he wanted, and the price was 7 years of blindness and agony. Rapunzel wanted freedom, love, a life beyond her prison. The price? Exile, poverty, single motherhood, lifelong trauma. No one is purely evil, not even the witch. She was controlling, possessive, cruel, but also desperately lonely. She raised Rapunzel from infancy, provided for her, taught her. Her love was twisted and toxic, but still love. No one is purely good. Her father was weak. The prince was selfish, putting Rapunzel in danger. Rapunzel herself made mistakes. The innocent comment that betrayed the prince, the choices that led to her pregnancy. Flawed humans, desperate, making the best decisions they could with limited information and unlimited needs. That's what makes this story more powerful than the sanitized version. Disney gave us a villain to hate, a hero to root for, clear moral lines. This version gives us humans making complicated choices, living with complicated consequences. The tower means different things to different people. For Rapunzel, it is imprisonment, isolation, the theft of her childhood. For the witch, it is safety, security, a place to keep what belongs to her. For the prince, it is an obstacle, a barrier between him and desire. Each perspective is valid. Each lens is shaped by needs and fears. The ending is not happy. Yes, Rapunzel and Friedrich reunite, marry, and have children. But they are irreparably damaged. The tower and thorns left scars that never fully heal. They spend their lives struggling with trauma, knowing their love came at a terrible cost. Is it worth it? The story doesn't say, it lets us decide. Was it worth 7 years of suffering to end up together? Was the brief joy worth the lifelong price? No right answer exists. That's the point. The witch disappears. No justice, no revenge, no closure. She leaves her victims to manage the aftermath. In real life, people who hurt us don't always face consequences. Sometimes they just vanish, and we are left to rebuild from the damage they caused. Unsatisfying, but true. The Brothers Grimm collected this story in the early 1800s, but it's much older. Versions exist across European folklore. The tower, the hair, the fall, the blindness, the reunion. These elements endure because they speak to something fundamental about human experience. We are all imprisoned in some way, by circumstance, by others' choices, by our fears and desires. We long for freedom, for connection, for someone to hear our voice. But freedom has a price. Connection has a price. Desire has a price. And sometimes that price exceeds what we can bear. What do we do with this story? We could sanitize it, turn it into a romantic adventure with a clear villain and a happy ending. That's what Disney did, and there is value in that. Children need stories where love wins and good defeats evil. But we also need truth. Stories that show the real cost of human desire, where escape isn't clean, trauma lingers, and justice is absent. Stories that say, yes, you can escape your tower, but the fall might blind you, the one you love may be forever changed, and you might spend the rest of your life dealing with the aftermath. And yet that survival, that connection, may still be worth it if you can endure it. This is not a happy story. It is honest. Sometimes honesty is more important than happiness. Rapunzel survived. Friedrich survived. They found each other. They built a life together. The Disney story ends with magic leaving, hair turning brown, ordinary life restored. In the real story, we do not know if the magic left. We know only that they survived. That alone is triumph. Survival is its own form of success. Building a life from ruins is its own kind of magic. We sanitized this story because its darkness is immense. The pregnancy, the blindness, the suffering, the absence of resolution. But maybe that darkness is what gives it power. Maybe we need to know towers are real, that people will lock you away even for your good. That love does not always save you, that scars remain, that healing is decades of hard work, sometimes incomplete. The tower remains, not literally, but always in memory, always in the cost. This is the story of Rapunzel, a girl stolen to pay a debt, a child locked in a tower for someone else's peace of mind, a woman who loved and lost, survived exile and poverty, bore children alone. A prince who climbed a tower, fell for desire, wandered blind and broken. A witch who tried to possess, control, and ultimately vanished. It is a story of control, possession, connection, and the human need to own. Of debt echoing across generations. Of freedom and its price. Of survival and the hard, imperfect, relentless work of living after trauma. This is the real Rapunzel. Not the fairy tale, not the happily ever after, but the truth. The witch's tower vanished, but only literally. Psychologically, metaphorically, it still stands. There are still people locked in towers, still people controlled by others who claim it's for their protection. Still voices singing from high windows that no one hears. Still princes climbing towers, thinking they are heroes, blind to the cost of their desire. Still witches holding too tightly to what they love, squeezing until it breaks. The story hasn't ended, it is still being told. Every time someone escapes control, every time someone pays for another's choices, every time love demands a price we never expected. So sleep now. Dream of towers and thorns, of hair like golden rope. Dream of voices echoing in the wilderness, of blind men wandering, of women giving birth alone. Dream of reunions paid for in tears and blood. Dream of freedom that costs everything. Of love that survives despite being broken. Of two people clutching each other in the wreckage and calling it victory. And when you wake, if you wake, remember the tower is still standing. The hair is still growing. Someone is still singing, waiting to be heard. The story isn't over. It never will be. Sleep well, and may your dreams be kinder than this story, but no less true.